A routine business trip turned into the quiet turning point of my life. Somewhere between a rain-slicked sidewalk and a hotel lobby piano, my boss said a single sentence that shook me to my core, in the best possible way. It wasn't scandal. It wasn't drama. It was respect, honesty, and an offer I never saw coming. You won't believe how a few careful words changed everything I thought I knew about myself. Before I begin, tell me in the comments which city you're watching from. Detroit, Phoenix, Boston, maybe a small town I've never heard of. I'm Tiffany, I'm 46, and this is how one rainy business trip rewrote my future in a way I'm still unpacking, one careful breath at a time. The flight out was the kind of early that makes the airport lights feel too bright. I held my coffee the way you hold a secret. Tight, close, careful not to spill. Bobby was already at the gate when I arrived, standing with that calm he always carries, sleeves rolled, reading glasses pushed up in his hair like a man who actually uses them. He looked up, nodded, and smiled with his eyes more than his mouth. "Morning, Tiffany," he said, and the way he said my name, like he had time for it, somehow took the edge off my nerves. I'm not a nervous flyer, exactly, but I'm not brave either. The weather app had painted the route in swirls of cloud. I kept thinking about all the little things I was responsible for on this trip. The pricing deck, the handouts, the demos, and how the smallest oversight can become a story people retell for months. Bobby noticed my list peeking from a blue folder and tapped it with a fingertip. "I like this," he said. "A plan that can survive a plane delay." On the plane, he took the aisle so I could watch the clouds. We barely talked, just the easy little things people say when you're sharing armrests with a colleague and not trying to read into anything. The hum of engines, the clink of ice in plastic cups, the small kindness of swapping peanuts for pretzels, because he knew I preferred the pretzels. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't charged. It was decent. I can't tell you what that means to a woman who has spent years learning to make herself smaller in rooms where volume gets confused with value. We landed in a city that wears rain like a jacket, sleek, gray, zipped up to the chin. A driver collected us and our presentation cases, and the hotel rose out of wet sidewalks like a promise with too much glass. Inside, check-in was a ballet of printers and key cards. One front desk glitch, then another. I felt my old reflexes wake up, the ones that make women apologize for existing. "Sorry, it's fine. Really, I can just," I had started, and Bobby gently stepped forward, not to bulldoze, but to clear the path. "We'll need 2 separate rooms," he said to the clerk, steady and respectful. "And please note that any charges for client meals will be on the company card." "Thank you." He turned to me and softened the moment with a quiet aside. "Go ahead and email the agenda to the client again. Storm delays make people forget their calendars." Sometimes the most unexpected moments are the ones where nothing goes wrong because someone else quietly chooses to make sure they don't. Standing there, watching him, I felt something shift, like a chair pulled out for me at a table I'd been standing beside for years. We set down our bags, promised to meet in the lobby in an hour, and separated to our rooms. Mine overlooked a river that couldn't decide which direction it wanted to take the day. Boats moved like thoughts, slow, then sudden, hesitant, then sure. I ironed my blouse the way my mother taught me, shoulders first, then cuffs, then the soft front where buttons live. I tucked my hair behind one ear, looked at the faint lines beside my eyes, and thought, it's taken me 46 years to look like a woman who knows what she's worth. The trouble is, I wasn't yet sure that I did. In the lobby, a pianist explored a melody that was all rain and resolve. Bobby was early, which I've learned is his habit. He had already checked the meeting room and arranged for water set on the left side of the table because I'm left-handed and he notices details like that. We walked through tomorrow's agenda, rehearsed transitions, and argued, kindly, about the order of slides. It should be story, proof, price, I said, pointing with the edge of my folder. Price belongs where it will make them breathe out, not in, he said, and I smiled because he was right, and I knew it. The ease of the exchange did something to the air between us. We moved like carpenters who've built 100 tables together and still measure twice. By early evening, a fatigue I hadn't admitted set in. He noticed that too. You don't have to be the last one standing, he said, and the sentence carried more weight than it should have. Then he added, dinner downstairs? Quiet corner. We can keep it light. People talk about inappropriate bosses and too familiar dinners. This was not that. The host seated us near a window filmed with raindrops, as if the city were choosing to be a watercolor tonight. The waiter introduced the special like a small performance. We ordered, we laughed at the minor disasters that make trips memorable, and for a long time the conversation kept to sensible islands. The client, the market, the sort of travel tips you only learn by losing a charger in 3 different airports. At some point, the talk got personal, not by accident, but by consent, one question at a time, like walking farther into a garden because the path is dry and the scent draws you. He asked, how would you end up in pricing and strategy? And I told him that I liked stories where numbers were the plot twist, that I found comfort in columns adding up when life didn't. I asked, has leadership always been the plan? And he told me, no, it was the result of being the person folks asked to read the room when no one else could. There was a moment when I mentioned my daughter leaving for college, the echo it left in the kitchen, the way I started talking to the plants, because they were reliable listeners. I don't share much with people I work with. But something about the rain and the piano, and the fact that Bobby had never once asked for my attention in a way that cost me anything. I found myself telling the truth. You do the work of making everyone comfortable, he said quietly, and then you go home and do it again. The words landed like a hand on a shoulder you didn't realize had been tense all week. I looked down at the napkin and smoothed the crease I had made in it. It's not a complaint, I said. It's just a shape my life took for a while. I didn't hear complaint, he answered. I heard competence. Those are different things. Lightning stitched a quick silver hem along the horizon. The pianist slipped into a tune I knew but couldn't name. And then it happened, the part where his words left their mark. You think you have to earn every square inch of the room you stand in, Bobby said, steady but kind. Tiffany, you don't. You've already earned it. Everyone else needs to catch up. A sentence that simple should not have done what it did, but it reached back through years of polite smiles and quiet swallowing of credit, and it found the teenage version of me who learned that applause was for other people. It found the young mother version of me who folded her ambition into the laundry basket to make space for everything and everyone else. It found the current me sitting at a small table on a wet night, and it asked, gently, are you ready to stop auditioning? I looked up. He wasn't grandstanding. He wasn't fishing for gratitude. He was offering a mirror, and the image in it was larger than I had dared to draw. What am I supposed to do with that? I asked, half laughing because tears were threatening, and I didn't want to be dramatic. Start by taking what you've already earned, he said. Tomorrow, I want you to lead the meeting, not the safe parts. All of it. I'll be there, but I'll be quiet, and I'll have your back in the places you can't see. The room sharpened. The waiter set down a plate I didn't taste for several minutes. I felt the old fears gather. What if I stumble? What if I freeze? And then I watched them recede, because someone I respected had made a bet on me out loud. There's a specific electricity in being trusted. It warms your hands first, then your spine. And one more thing, he added, a little smile teasing the edge of his voice. You've been undertitled and over-relied upon. That ends. When we get back, I'm recommending a new role. Director. Same work you're doing, but with the authority to do it. No surprises. No end runs. We'll put it in writing. If you want it. If you want it. It seems like a small phrase until you realize how rarely it's asked. So much of a woman's life is other people deciding on her behalf and wrapping it in praise. He was asking. He was offering, not insisting. That's the difference between pressure and respect. I took a breath I didn't know I'd been hoarding. I want it. I said then, because honesty is a muscle you have to use, I added, I'm also afraid. Good, he said, and the way he said it made the word feel like a door, not a wall. Fear is data. We'll read it. We won't obey it. We finished dinner without hurrying. When we stood, the city had softened into a dark satin of lights reflected in puddles. Back in the lobby, the pianist paused to retune, and the silence felt like a pause between chapters. At the elevator, we both stepped back at once, a small polite dance that made us laugh. Walk with me a minute, he asked, motioning toward the window overlooking the river. It didn't feel strange. It felt like the last paragraph of a good letter. We stood there shoulder to shoulder, not touching, looking at the water cutting itself into small arguments with the wind. He spoke first. I need you to hear something without deflecting, he said. You're not an understudy. You're the lead. That's not a compliment. It's a fact. I don't say that lightly, and I'm not careless with this kind of thing. I nodded because words were hard, and I didn't want to break something by speaking too soon. Also, he added, voice lowering just enough to be private without being secret, I never blur lines. Not with people I'm responsible for. If anything here has felt complicated, let me be clear. I respect you, your work, and your boundaries. My offer is professional. My trust is personal. Both are real. There's a kind of safety that lets the air return to your lungs. That was it. No implication. No heavy-handed suggestion that kindness was currency for anything else. Just a grown man saying a thing cleanly and leaving it on the table for me to consider. Thank you, I said, for the clarity. Clarity is the least anyone deserves, he said. Sleep. Be the voice in that room tomorrow you've always been in your own head. I'll be the floor under your feet. He said good night and stepped back, keeping the space respectful, and I realized that even the way he left the moment was a kind of leadership. No lingering, no uncertainty handed to me to carry upstairs. He took his elevator. I took mine. In my room, I hung my suit jacket on the back of a chair like it was a flag I intended to fly in the morning. I laid out my notes and then forced myself to put them away. I brewed a small cup of tea from a hotel kettle that had probably boiled more nerves than water. The rain kept talking to the window. I sat on the edge of the bed and thought about the long trail of choices behind me and the short list in front of me. Saying yes, standing tall, trusting that someone else's faith in me didn't have to feel like borrowed clothes. Before I slept, I texted my daughter a photograph of the river and typed, "Big day tomorrow. Send me your best emoji." She sent me 7 stars, a lion, and a gymnast, which felt like both a blessing and a dare. Then I messaged my sister the boiled-down version we use when life gets big. Wish me courage. She wrote back, "You already have it. Just wear it." Morning came clean and practical, the way good mornings do. I woke before the alarm, and the city outside had traded its silver for pewter. I put on my suit and the calmest pair of heels I own, the ones that know every conference carpet in the Midwest. In the mirror, I saw the same face as last night, but steadier, like a song you recognize even when someone changes the key. Downstairs, the breakfast room hummed with the quiet logistics of people who mean business. Laptops open, coffee cups lifted like small trophies. Bobby was at a corner table with a notebook and 2 pens, one placed near an empty chair like a welcome mat. I sat, and he slid a small, folded card toward me. It wasn't dramatic, just my name at the top and 4 lines beneath, written in clear handwriting. He said, "These are your anchors. You already know them. If the room sways, grip anyone." I unfolded the card. It read, "Why we're here. What they need. What only we can do. What happens next." I held the card, felt the weight of simple things done well, and realized I wasn't shaking. He didn't offer a pep talk or an anthem. He offered me back to myself. When we stood to go upstairs to the client's floor, he paused, as if remembering something, and then handed me the clicker. Not ceremonious, just deliberate. "Lead us in," he said. "It's your room." We reached the double doors of the conference suite, the glass reflecting our 2 shapes, colleagues in the rainlit morning. I could see my own shoulders set, not hard but sure. Bobby caught my eye, and for a second it felt like the pianist from the night, before I'd returned to play an opening chord only I could hear. I pushed the door and stepped into the room. Morning sunlight washed the city in pale gold, pooling on the conference table as if to spotlight every word waiting to be spoken. I walked into the client's suite with Bobby half a step behind me, steady as a shadow I didn't have to look back for. The chairs were already arranged, the screens flickering with our slides, and I felt that strange pull between fear and courage, like standing at the edge of a river, knowing you can swim, but not yet knowing how cold the water will be. I greeted the executives, my voice firmer than I expected. It wasn't polished charm. It was clarity, the kind that comes from repeating truths in your own head long enough that they start to sound natural out loud. I noticed Bobby's silence, intentional, protective. He was letting me lead, and I realized how rare that gift is, space that isn't given as a test, but as recognition. The meeting unfolded like a symphony I hadn't realized I'd memorized. Questions came, sharp and probing, but my answers held. When a finance director pressed me about margins, my numbers landed clean. When the CEO asked why us instead of competitors, I felt that little spark of story in my chest, the one about value, trust, and proof, and I delivered it without hesitation. Somewhere in the middle, I forgot to be afraid. At one point, I glanced sideways. Bobby wasn't typing, wasn't correcting, wasn't intervening. He was watching with the kind of focus that says, "I trust this person to carry the room." And I was. For the first time in years, I wasn't borrowing authority. I was wearing it. The meeting ended with nods, handshakes, and the small exhale of victory. As the clients filed out, Bobby leaned toward me and said quietly, "See, they didn't just listen. They believed, because you believed first." We walked out together, and I swear the rain outside had slowed just for us. In the elevator, neither of us spoke for a long moment. Silence wasn't empty. It was full. Then he broke it with a sentence that will stay with me until I'm old enough to tell this story to grandkids. "Tiffany, this is what leadership looks like when you stop apologizing for having it." Something in me settled that I didn't know had been restless. For years, I had worked, delivered, stayed late, carried the invisible weight, and still questioned whether I belonged at the table. But in that moment, I wasn't questioning. I was claiming. That evening, after contracts were sketched and champagne poured, I found myself walking the city streets alone for a while, shoes tapping wet pavement. Neon signs flickered in puddles like quiet applause. I thought about my daughter, about the example I wanted to set. Not just hard work, that part she'd already seen, but the courage to accept recognition without shrinking. Later, Bobby and I met in the lobby one last time before flying home.